In One Piece Chapter 295, Oda not only unveiled the Golden Bell of Shandora, but also possibly hinted at the location of the ancient weapon Uranus. This hint pointed us directly to Elbaf, the primary candidate for its location, as it is the central setting of the ongoing Elbaf arc. In my last video, we discussed how the Emerald City could be hidden at the top of Treasure Tree Atom within Elbaf's upper region, the Heaven World. So I want to make a follow-up video outlining 3 reasons why I believe that not only does the Emerald City exist on top of Treasure Tree Atom, but it is also hiding the ancient weapon Uranus by exploring how Skypiea's foreshadowing could be pointing to its location. So stick around throughout the video. You don't want to miss how we can easily connect these narrative elements to another One Piece arc you probably didn't expect. Let's get into it. For today's discussion, it's essential to understand why we're here in the first place. Here, as in Elbaf, not here in the existential sense. Elbaf next to Wano has become one of the islands we have anticipated visiting in the entire series, as it was introduced back in the Little Garden arc. Given Oda's buildup of Elbaf with such high expectations, including an absolute dump truck of lore and history the island has in store for us, since giants have a long lifespan, it's safe to expect to leave this island armed with a ton of endgame level information. With this knowledge, we'll be directly propelled into not only finding significant clues about locating the One Piece treasure, but also engaging in the final war that will determine the fate of the world. It makes sense for Elbaf as a final saga story arc to hide something extraordinary, such as a road poneglyph or an ancient weapon like Uranus, especially when we reconsider how Skypiea served as a seemingly standalone adventure that ultimately unraveled deeper connections within the overarching narrative. So let's go back to Skypiea for a moment, because this is where everything starts to click. Skypiea is easily one of the most lore-heavy arcs in One Piece, and as we know, Oda only includes details with purpose. We were introduced to incredible visual storytelling, a freaking island made out of clouds, a mythical landmark, and one key structure, Giant Jack. Here's where it gets interesting. In Chapter 295, we learn that the Golden Bell is located on a cloud near the top of Giant Jack. It has been hidden in plain sight for centuries. This means that the bell, which we see as a symbol of hope and legacy during the Skypiea arc, sits at the highest point. It represents both a literal and symbolic summit that can only be reached by overcoming great challenges. This idea is central to the themes of Skypiea. Within One Piece's story, this isn't just an isolated case. Oda has established a consistent pattern of placing objects of great significance in high locations, forcing characters to face extreme trials to uncover them. A few examples include the road poneglyph on Zou, the moon, also known as Ferris Wheel, to Enel, who had a disturbing obsession with it, and even the treasure chests on the island of rare animals that Gaimon once sought to claim, which turned out to be empty. These examples set a precedent. Oda loves using towering, elevated locations to house legends, treasures, and hidden truths. Skypiea's Golden Bell, the road poneglyph on Zou, and Fairy Birth all follow this formula, creating a storytelling pattern that feels deliberate and meaningful. Now, let's bring it back to Elbaf. The heart of Elbaf's island is, of course, Treasure Tree Atom, a tree so massive that it's essentially the island's foundation. If Skypiea's Golden Bell represented the culmination of the Shandoran legacy near the top of Giant Jack, then perhaps the Treasure Tree Atom mirrors that exact setup, especially with Giant Jack and Treasure Tree Atom both being plants. That being said, what if Oda has utilized Skypiea to hint at the ancient weapon Uranus' location positioned atop Treasure Tree Atom and Elbaf's Heaven World? Also, if you watch my theory that the Emerald City is at the top of Treasure Tree Atom, adding Uranus to the Emerald City supports this idea. Since the Emerald City is a nod to the Wizard of Oz, it represents hopes and dreams, strengthening the connection between Skypiea and Elbaf while adding depth to the story about the ancient weapons. We should think about how Oda may have taken inspiration from the planets when creating the ancient weapons. It's clear he's used the planets to define the 5 elders, especially the original ones before Garling replaced Saturn. Among Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, Uranus has rings that give it a special feature. Therefore, I think it makes sense to suggest that Oda used the idea of rings as an important detail for the Golden Bell. This connection also hints at the ancient weapon Uranus, especially since it relates to the concept of ringing. And we can take things a step further, because the design of the ancient weapon Uranus might not be as abstract as you think. What if its design draws inspiration from one of history's greatest engineering marvels, the Chicago Ferris Wheel. So now that we've established that Oda has a habit of placing legendary treasures and revelations at towering, unreachable heights, let's talk about what could be up top of Treasure Tree Atom, the ancient weapon Uranus. But what would Uranus look like? Oda is no stranger from drawing from real-world inspirations, and here's where things get really interesting. The Chicago Ferris Wheel from the 1893 Chicago World Fair. In the last video, we explored how Oda could have drawn influences from the Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz. This iconic city was inspired by the fairgrounds of the White City from the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Thematically speaking, both the Emerald City and the White City represent dreams, imagination, and creativity. Therefore, it seems reasonable to suggest that Oda might have taken inspiration from the original source of the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz, the Chicago World Fair, particularly the Chicago Ferris Wheel. The Chicago Ferris Wheel wasn't just a ride, it was a groundbreaking feat of engineering, something so massive and awe-inspiring that it became the fair's centerpiece. It symbolized human ingenuity, ambition, and progress, a literal wheel reaching into the sky. Now, why is this important? Uranus, the planet, and the mythological figure is associated with the sky, cycles, and cosmic order. The Ferris wheel, with its circular motion and ability to elevate people to breathtaking heights, mirrors this concept perfectly. We can interpret the Ferris wheel as a representation of cycles, a recurring theme in One Piece where history repeats itself and struggles come full circle. The theme of cycles is even more relevant when you remember the history behind Treasure Tree Atom and how Elbaf was initially this war-torn island that was always in constant war. And yet, the tree always remained surviving and symbolizing hope in the darkest of times. And what could be more darker than constant war 24/7? It's also fair to note that the concept of the Ferris wheel also connects to the idea of reaching the heavens, much like Uranus' association as the god of the sky. In other words, a Ferris wheel isn't just an amusement park ride, it is a metaphor for perspective, height, and revolution, both figuratively and literally. Also, we shouldn't overlook how Oda has portrayed Elbaf in the latest chapters. It's immense. Everything on this island is depicted on a mythical scale, from the plants and the animals to the structures. It's all larger than life. Therefore, if Oda were to incorporate Uranus here, wouldn't it be fitting for its design to reflect the incredible majesty of Elbaf? So imagine sitting high atop Treasure Tree Atom, the ancient weapon Uranus, taking the form of a massive wheel-like structure. It would perfectly blend with the surrounding treetop environment while standing out as this grand technology marvel, much like the Chicago Ferris Wheel did in real life. Another visual key detail may have been a clue during the Sabaody Archipelago arc when we explored Sabaody Park. One of the first attractions we see in this panel of Chapter 499 is a swinging ship. Now, what does this remind you of? Oh yeah, the Spar, or the Mist Ship, we recently saw in Chapter 1133. That's used to move around the sun world of Elbaf. And what other prominently visible attractions do we see in the same panel of Chapter 499? A Ferris wheel. Interesting. I don't know about you guys, but it seems particularly purposeful for the Ferris wheel and the swinging ship to be the first two attraction rides to catch your attention in this panel. At least it did for me. So I'm willing to bet that Oda did this on purpose to prepare us in the long run that once we see the Spar ship in Elbaf, we're going to think, oh, maybe there's going to be more technology in Elbaf that's reminiscent of the amusement park rides in Sabaody Park. Perhaps even a Ferris wheel that could somehow turn out to be the ancient weapon Uranus. Now you're probably wondering, okay, that's cool and all, but what the hell did Imu use to destroy Lulusia Kingdom then? And yeah, it's fair to speculate that the ancient weapon, as Ivankov addressed it as, could be Uranus. However, Oda has yet to explicitly confirm that the weapon Imu used is indeed Uranus. In fact, Oda established a precedent within the series that there could be multiple versions of the ancient weapons that aren't necessarily the real deal. So for example, the blueprints for Pluton that Frankie held onto until he burned them during both the Water 7 and his lobby arcs. Those blueprints were not plans to create the real Pluton, but rather a weapon to counter the real Pluton if it fell into the wrong hands. Plus, we've already gotten confirmation at the tail end of Wano that the real Pluton is actually hidden at the bottom of Mount Fuji where ancient Wano resides. So it makes sense for Oda to reveal that the so-called ancient weapon used by Imu to destroy Lulusia Kingdom is not the true Uranus. Instead, it could be a counter version of Uranus, developed with Vegapunk's involvement, especially since he's also created the Mother Flame, which serves as its power source. After all, Vegapunk's technological advancements have primarily been adaptations of the technologies from the Ancient Kingdom. So from a visual perspective, I think Oda intentionally illustrated Imu's ancient weapon amidst the hovering clouds in chapter 1060 to evoke the imagery of a tree canopy due to the cloud shapes. This could suggest that Uranus's actual location is at the top of Treasure Tree Atom, but take that with a grain of salt since this is just speculation on my part. But here's where things get even crazier. If Uranus is at the top of the Treasure Tree Atom, and the world government knows or finds out about it, then there's just no way they'll sit back and let it collect all that Elbaf dust. So this is where the Gods Knights could come into play, and they might just be heading to Elbaf to retrieve the real Uranus. Okay, so we made some compelling connections. Uranus could be hidden at the top of Treasure Tree Atom. Its design inspired by something as monumental and grand as the Chicago Ferris Wheel, mirroring Skypiea's Golden Bell. But here's the burning question. If Uranus is there, who's going to use it? Or rather, who's going to steal it? And this is where the Gods Knights could perhaps come in. The Gods Knights have been teased since chapter 1054 as the last bastion of the world government's forces. We don't know much about them, but their presence has loomed in the background, and Elbaf could be where they finally make their move. Coincidentally, as of writing the script, it looks like they do show up at the end of chapter 1134 as Shanks' supposed brother, twin, or at the very least the Figureland relative is among the two that appear within the summoning magic circle. In one of my previous videos, I discussed a theory by Mr. Mort regarding the potential idea of the man marked by flames being a member of the Gods Knights, perhaps being among the two we see at the end of chapter 1134. In the same video, I shared my take and expanded on what his role could be in Elbaf, being the real culprit behind the killing of the previous king of Elbaf, King Harold, and stealing the royal poneglyph. So definitely check out that previous video after watching this one. But essentially, I want to propose that with the possibility of a member of the Gods Knights playing a role in the eternal conflicts of Elbaf, as we learn about the prolonged imprisonment of Loki, who I speculate was framed or instead took the fall to prevent Elbaf from clashing with the world government directly, we could build upon the presence of the Gods Knights by having them invade Elbaf and steal the ancient weapon Uranus. It kind of makes sense, right? Well, there is one thing we have to consider. Imu and the world government already have their hands on the ancient weapon that destroyed the Lucia Kingdom, as we discussed in the previous topic. So of course, you're probably wondering, okay, what's the point of the Gods Knights taking Uranus if they already possess a weapon capable of sinking the world? This is where I believe York comes into play. So, in the aftermath of the Egghead incident, York was officially placed under the command of Saturn's replacement Figureland Garling, since she's capable of replicating the Mother Flame. Now that Vegapunk is dead and gone, not completely, but the OG Stella Vegapunk is no more. The rest of the surviving satellites, except for Lilith, are still around as they Voltron into a single body. But not only that, they also took precautious measures to 1. Disconnect Punk records from Egghead Island, and 2. They destroyed all of York's spare parts to ensure that she wouldn't be capable of reviving herself in case she got killed. So I'm willing to bet that it was possible for Edison to somehow desync or delete Punk records information from York. That way, she forgets how to replicate the Mother Flame, which is, let's be honest, the sole reason why she's even alive in the first place. So, without her knowledge of replicating the Mother Flame, she's utterly useless to the Five Elders and Imu, meaning no more erasing other islands and kingdoms like Lucia. This would force Figureland Garling, as the new warrior god of science and defense, to shift gears. Instead of relying on an ancient weapon replica that's useless without the knowledge of the Mother Flame within their grasp, they would go after the real deal, the true Uranus. Figureland Garling, as the former leader of the Gods Knights, would be perfectly positioned to spearhead this operation of retrieving the real Uranus and deploying the Gods Knights to Elbaf. I also do want to bring up that Loki mentioned to Luffy that he wants to be free by dawn, which is an oddly specific timetable for Loki to mention. So I wonder if that could tie into the impending invasion of sorts, possibly by the Gods Knights, which Loki may want to protect Elbaf from. But that could be an entirely separate situation, but who knows. Either way, I think having a powerful antagonistic force like the Gods Knights would force the Giants to have their stake in this conflict. Treasure Tree Atom isn't just a symbol of their culture, it's the foundation of the infrastructure of the island of Elbaf. And for the Gods Knights to claim the ancient weapon Uranus, if it is hidden within the treetops in Treasure Tree Atom, it would mean desecrating the tree itself, thereby striking a direct blow to the Giants' honor and culture. The idea of the race for the ancient weapon Uranus would bring incredible urgency to the Elbaf arc, whether it's the Gods Knights stepping in or Treasure Tree Atom being put in the crosshairs. The stakes couldn't be higher. And what's fascinating is how this ties into the idea of the Emerald City potentially being hidden in the astral world or the heaven world of the treasure tree atom. If Uranus is there, it could mean that the ancient weapon and the mythical city share an unexpected connection. And so to truly understand the potential significance of the Emerald City and what it may hold for Elbaf, check out my video in which I discuss why the Emerald City is located on Elbaf.